But to try and get some perspective on what's actually happening, we're now being joined by Bill Roggio, who's a senior fellow at FDD, been doing a lot of reporting on the global war on terror and the situation in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, other such countries. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. How do you rate whatever's happening right now, these attacks that we are seeing now? Is the problem of terrorism inside Pakistan? That means terror not aimed at outside people, but aimed at Pakistan itself. Is it spiraling out of control? Is this something new that we are seeing, more of the same?
Good morning, and thanks for having me on. Yes, it is. What we are witnessing is more of the same. I keep reminding people that Pakistan witnessed a very deadly insurgency carried out by the movement of the Taliban in Pakistan from 2007, from its formation, to 2015-16, when the Pakistani state tamped it down. More than 100,000 Pakistanis were killed in this time period. Assaults all throughout the terrorist assaults all throughout the Pakistani state, including in general headquarters in Rawalpindi, attacks in provincial capitals. It was horrific. Now, the Pakistani state tamped it down, but the Pakistanis always knew that this was a possibility. The Pakistani Taliban is supported by the Afghan Taliban. The Pakistani Taliban swears allegiance to the Afghan Taliban. And yet Pakistan supported the Afghan Taliban because it desired strategic depth. It desired to keep India and the US out of its backyard in Afghanistan. And so the Pakistani state hoped that the Afghan Taliban would return the favor and keep a lid on the Pakistani Taliban, but that hasn't happened. I maintain that the Pakistani state is far more interested in maintaining its strategic depth in Afghanistan than it cares about its own citizens. Again, during that 2007 and 2015-16 time period, more than 100,000 Pakistanis were killed by the movement of the Taliban in Pakistan, and yet the Pakistanis still continued to play a cynical game. If it could weather 100,000 casualties, it'll weather a couple of thousand.
Well, actually, I'm just wondering whether you would trace the origin of this back even further than that. I mean, is it part of the continuum that actually began all the way back in Operation, Tupac, launched by Zia-ul-Haq? The fact when the Pakistanis started setting up groups like the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Harkat-ul-Ansar, and groups like that, way back, in fact, even before 9/11 is when the world woke up and started to see what was happening. But the Pakistanis were encouraging these groups to go across to fight in Kashmir. And that's when Al-Qaeda came up, supported by the Taliban, supported by Pakistan. So is it that same continuum that actually dates back almost 20 to 30 years?
You're absolutely correct. Those were groups that the Pakistanis thought they could control. And then along comes the phenomenon of Al-Qaeda that it embeds with the Taliban. They became strong allies. Of course, all of the Pakistani terror groups, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and et cetera, the alphabet soup of Pakistani terror groups that were directed at India, they all coalesced and came together to fight the US after it invaded Afghanistan post 9/11. And the Pakistanis didn't realize what was happening, or either they didn't realize it, or they understood exactly what was happening and allowed it to happen anyway in its desire for strategic depth. And, the Pakistanis are directly responsible for what they have been experiencing, these deadly attacks on its soldiers, on its police, on its civilians, on its government officials. The deep state, the ISI, Inter Service Intelligence Directorate, the Pakistani military, Pakistani politicians, they're all colluded in creating this monster that has turned on it over the last 15, 16 years.
So, when we keep hearing these reports, which have been getting a lot of attention, certainly in India and in other parts of the world, there are extremists and terrorists in Pakistan who, for example, are being killed right now by unknown gunmen. It's not clear what's happening exactly. Do you think it's could be part of a cleaning up by the Pakistani state itself? Could it be? I mean, we don't know. There's some allegations it's happening from across the border, from India, but could it also be elements in the Pakistani state trying to get rid of these people who are eventually going to be a threat to Pakistan itself?
It's certainly a possibility. I would put the number one culprit as being the Islamic State, which is an enemy of the Pakistani Taliban as it's in Al-Qaeda's orbit, right? The Islamic State, Al-Qaeda ejected the Islamic State in 2014 because its leader refused to swear allegiance or to maintain his allegiance to Al-Qaeda. And then you've had this split ever since. That would be my number one culprit. But I certainly would have put it past Indian intelligence or elements of the Pakistani state going after the ones that they feel they can't control. And there certainly are Pakistani Taliban movement and Taliban and Pakistan leaders who I think the Pakistanis believe they can keep the reins on, and some who are out of bounds. And the Pakistani state did target the movement of the Taliban in Pakistan during, actually since 2007. So it's certainly, I don't discount that, but I believe that a lot of these assassinations that we're hearing about are very likely linked to the Islamic State, to that rivalry.
All right, that's a really interesting perspective, and keep an eye on that as well. Bill Roggio, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.